We're a new club here in Victoria County, and we're composed of strictly Victoria Republicans. Our goal is to help provide education to Republicans by allowing our Republican members and our voters to interview and visit with our elected officials as well as our candidates. In the coming months, we'll be having some meetings of the club, and we hope that you'll be able to join us. Today, our first interview is with Clint Ives. He's with precinct number 4. He's running against Mr. Mark Schroller, and Mr. Schroller is unable to be with us, although we did invite him to attend and to participate. But our moderator is P.J. Farley. Let y'all visit with Mr. Clint Ives.
Thank you, Dale. As Mr. Zook said, my name is Clint Ives. I am in my second term, currently holding office as County Commissioner for Precinct 4, 7 years, 2 months, 8 days. That picks up the northeastern quadrant of Victoria County. North Navarro and Highway 77 creates the boundary between Precinct 4 and Precinct 2 all the way to the county line. From that boundary, we move north and northeast and get close to encompassing most of Wood High, but then the line gets somewhat jagged in the DaCosta area. Married for 12 years, 3 little boys, 5, 8, and 9 that certainly keep us busy. So a lot going on. Look forward to the conversation. I want to thank you all for the invitation. I think it'll be very beneficial for the public.
Glad to have you. Okay, I've got a couple questions for you. Let's start off with this one, just to kind of get to it. The average wage earner in Victoria makes $40,055 a year. Victoria County Commissioners earn $80,000. Why does your job deserve that large of a salary?
You know, 8 years ago, I would have froze at that question. That's a difficult question to defend why you should be paid a certain amount, given the perception of the job and maybe not necessarily the reality of the job. After holding that position for 8 years, I can easily make some private sector comparisons of the duties of our job. So I'll touch on 2 of them, and then I'll circle back to a third example that really quantifies that scale. The first private sector side, and I got to take a step back and kind of explain the duties of the job a little bit. We've got commissioners have a precinct hat, and then we have a courthouse hat. So we got a hard hat for construction, and then we got a business hat for the courthouse. And there's not a standard for, say, amount of time in the precinct versus amount of time in the courthouse. Everybody's different because all of the precincts are different. And every commissioner approaches that job and emphasizes the different pieces of that job differently. This time of year, we're now getting back into pavement. The off-season for paving, mainly because the products aren't available during the winter months, they're unavailable, so we got to shut down basically from mid-November to mid-February. So in the precinct right now, which is one of the reasons I'm wearing a work jacket and not a coat and tie, is we went into Schmidt Road a couple days ago, and so we're getting this road prepped to be paved. Schmidt Road all the way to Tipton Road. So I was out there this morning, and my role in the precinct is comparable to a superintendent's role at a local mom and pop paving company, if you will. And by mom and pop, I don't mean 1 to 2 employees that are essentially self-employed operating under a DBA. I'm comparing my operation to, say, something more local, like Brandon Paving. Brandon Paving is a local family-owned paving company. But they have the capabilities of bidding on multi-million-dollar textile projects. But they're still a family-owned paving company right here in Victoria, Texas. And so I'm just using them as an example because I know those guys very well. So if you look at what we do annually on the construction side, we're capable, as we did last year, of paving 14 miles of new pavement. So 14 miles of new pavement, based on our budget, our material bids, our equipment fleet, and our personnel, you can kind of structure this. It's not apples to apples, but you can start to make a comparison of a private sector paving company, okay? If we looked at the numbers based on improvements, the numbers in relative to the improvement that we make in the precinct, the amount of staff that we have, and the multi-millions of dollars worth of heavy equipment and the fleet that we have, and what we're able to achieve with those resources, in the private sector of a construction company, you would have a superintendent making six figures in order to keep that operation running smoothly. In order for that operation to run smoothly, achieve that target at the end of the year, and generate a profit for the company. That superintendent would be handling permits, that superintendent would be handling equipment, he would be handling employees, materials. There's a lot of weight on the shoulders of that superintendent. So in the private sector, you would see a salary around the six-figure range. Now, let's swap hats, because I said I've got two hats that I wear. In the courthouse, it's more of an administrative role. We have a $37.5 million general fund budget. We have 600 county employees, and we have 29 different departments. If you took an administrator of a corporation that was in charge of a $37.5 million budget and 600 employees and 29 different departments, or let's say 29 different offices or 29 different locations, if you will, to try to balance this argument out in the private sector, you would see an administrator that would be making well into six figures. So from the administrative role of a county commissioner, as well as the construction role of a county commissioner, I think the salary is in line. I truly do. Now, to follow that up and kind of quantify it a little better, whenever we are going through the budget process, typically in the month of August, is when we prepare the county budget for the next calendar year. When salary questions arise, we always resort back to a Texas Association of Counties survey. Texas Association of Counties, TAC, if you will, puts out a survey of salaries on elected officials, from the county commissioners to the county judges to the treasurers to the tax assessor collector to the constables to the JPs all the way to the district judges. Every elected official in the state of Texas in every county has a salary that is public record. And so TAC composes a survey of those salaries. That survey is structured and tiered: counties less than 50,000 in population, counties between 50,000 and 100,000 in population, 100 to 150. They increase 50,000 population all the way up to our largest county in 50,000 increments. Because you couldn't compare the salary of a county commissioner in Goliad County to a county commissioner in Harris County. So they break it down in tiers of 50,000 population brackets, okay? Victoria County falls in the bracket between 50,000 and 100,000 because we're currently at about 92,000 in population, okay? In that spectrum of salary scales for counties in Texas, straight across the board, for counties between the population of 50 and 100, Victoria County is a little high. The average salary for counties in that category are in the 70s, okay? Now, but Victoria's right on that cuff because we're at 92,000. The tier changes in that salary at 100,000 in population. Once Victoria County goes over the edge of that 100,000 population, the average county commissioner salary is well north of six figures. So if you look at the salary average straight across for counties between 50 and 100,000, Victoria County is a little high, but you got to factor in that we are right on that cuff, right on that doorstep of falling over into that 100,000 category. And at that point, Victoria County will be at the low end of that spectrum. So I think we have progressed in our salary orders. We do our best to maintain fairness. We look at the salaries, we look at the duties, and we just balance it the best we can. It was a very good question, and I'll thank you for the opportunity to explain that. We get that question asked a lot, and it's not an easy question to answer in a short amount of time.
Right. Now, as far as county budget, which you mentioned, it says sales tax collections are increasing. For 3 years, the county budget has decreased. What would be your priorities in precinct 4 if you were to have an additional $500,000 to spend in your precinct?
So our biggest sales tax year, if I'm not mistaken, was 2013, I think. It could have been 2012. Basically, it was in the heat of the Eagleford boom. And if you take a step back 10 years from that peak, so if we peaked sometime in 2012, 2013, that peak was around $10.7 million in sales tax revenue. Our sales tax revenue is based on a half a penny. Victoria County gets a half a penny, the 8.25 cents that you pay on the dollar in sales tax for buying, I don't think they tax water, but for buying this pen, the 8.25 that you pay on the dollar, out of that 8.25, we get 1/2 of 1 penny. Okay, so it gives you an idea of the growth of our economy and how much is being spent on a daily basis. But for our peak, it was $10.7 million in sales tax revenue out of 1/2 of a penny of that sales tax rate. So that's a phenomenal amount of spending in Victoria County in order to generate that much revenue. Okay, we are currently budgeted at $7.7 million. So you see that $3 million decrease in revenue. All right. If you take a further step back, 10 years ago, it was like $5 to $6 million. Okay, so we're still not, we've fallen off from the Eagleford boom, for lack of a better term, but we're still not where we were 10 years ago in regards to that slump. And that slump, if you want to attribute it to an economical collapse, you could have compared it to the subprime mortgage crisis, because you've got indicators in an economy, you've got historical markers. You can mark the subprime mortgage crisis. Budgets fell, economies fell. Then you had the Eagleford spike, and there is nothing to improve a local economy like the oil and gas business. It is the ultimate B12 shot. It is capitalism at its finest. It works. It will fill your hotel rooms. It will fill your restaurants. Everybody's working. Everybody's happy. They're going to dances on the weekend. They're going to parties. The economy can dictate the mood of the public simply by that wonderful B12 shot of working. I truly think people want to work, and it harmonizes the public. So, not to get off base, I'm going to circle back to your original question, but I'm going to give you, just trying to give you a little background on what sales tax revenue means to us. Okay, so there's an old county judge saying that if you live by sales tax, you will die by sales tax, because sales tax is fluid. You inflate your budget and inflate your operations and inflate your services on the local level based on sales tax revenue alone, give it 3 to 5 years and you will be sweating, because it's going to be fluid. There's going to be ups and downs. In that 15-year period from the subprime mortgage crisis to the Eagleford boom and to where we are now, it has been a triple hump cycle. Okay, so you have to expect it and you have to average that. Victoria County took that surplus back in the days of 10 and nearly $11 million in sales tax revenue. We were still under budgeting our sales tax revenue coming in. We may have been budgeting $9 million and then $12 million shows up, or 11.7. So we were using that surplus to go into our fund balance. And our fund balance is nothing more than a reserve fund. Okay? So that reserve fund built to a comfortable level. What was that comfortable level? We reached a point where we nearly had 40% of our general fund in a reserve fund. Okay, that's a healthy financial situation, and we saw it during Hurricane Harvey. Hurricane Harvey hit, and in the first payroll cycle, we spent $1 million in overtime for first responders to be in the field every shift, every day, as much as possible. In the immediate recovery efforts, we had to have that cash on hand. During that building process in you know, let's say 2010 to 2014, when the sales tax revenue was coming in, that is what was building that reserve fund. We didn't have the health of the reserve fund that we have now. So we used that surplus to build that reserve, desperately needed in Hurricane Harvey. So circling back to answer your question, how would I spend that extra revenue? I would spend that extra revenue cautiously. I would spend it cautiously because of the volatility of sales tax revenue. I would try to find a one-time project. If I had $500,000 in sales tax revenue and the county judge says, Ives, you are in charge of a project, bring me a project that's gonna give us the most bang for our buck in Victoria County, you've got $500,000 to spend, show me what you got. I would try to identify a capital project. I would try to identify a building, an expansion of an office, an expansion of an office facility, not necessarily an office meaning personnel. Investing sales tax revenue in personnel only means that when that sales tax falls, you're going to have to get creative within your general fund to sustain those employees, because now that extra revenue isn't there to continue paying them. So it's a slippery slope with sales tax revenue. You live by it, you can die by it. But I would focus on capital, a capital improvement with that. I love roads. I'd probably build a road.
Well, that's what I was about to get to.
Segue into
the next one, which is, what process would you go through in choosing the priority roads and bridges? Which ones would be your priority as far as roads and bridges? Let's say you had $500,000 to spend on roads and bridges.
I would easily say that we would stick to our current process of prioritizing our roads, but that priority process is based on the budget that we have, roughly 1.4 to 1.5. I'm 40,000 down from last year in my road and bridge budget, because we made deep cuts. In 17, we made deep cuts in the general fund in order to balance that budget with our taxpayers in mind. We are currently at the effective tax rate. Holding that line at the effective tax rate, which is the conservatives, it's a conservative Christmas gift. If a conservative can just set their tax rate at the effective tax rate, most conservatives in the state of Texas that understand taxation, they will be happy, because that effective tax rate is calculated through a fair process, and that effective tax rate is generally accepted as a fair tax, if there is such a thing as a fair tax. So we held the line with that effective tax rate, okay? No new taxes on the books. And by doing that, we had to make some deep cuts in 2018. The 2018 budget is tight. It is a bare bones tight budget. But we view that as probably one of the best budgets we've ever seen. We have trimmed down areas that needed to be trimmed down. We have made cuts where we need to make cuts. Our department heads would argue this, but Judge Zeller and the Commissioner's Court, myself included, went through a very difficult process, but a very healthy process for Victoria County in order to put together the 2018 budget. In my opinion, it is one of our best budgets. Now, Road and Bridge took a cut. I wasn't happy about that. Nor were the department heads that took a cut. But you know, if you're going to cut, you better include your own house. And who would I be as a county commissioner, but also a budget officer, to expect a deep cut out of the health department or a deep cut out of the airport when I wasn't doing the same in my own house? So it was a healthy budget process this past year. But to answer a hypothetical, which is somewhat difficult, if I had $500,000 or if I had some windfall money to put into road and bridge, how would I prioritize that?
I said, watch the video from the last.
How would I prioritize that $500,000? I would prioritize that $500,000 on thoroughfares. We struggle in our precincts with our infrastructure because we've got explosive growth in the two northern precincts, both Precinct 4 as well as Precinct 2. We have seen numerous subdivisions come in, explosive growth in that direction. Everything's going north. So what that poses for us, that poses a difficulty in, number one, maintaining what we have and improving what we have. Those are two completely different tasks. Just trying to stop the bleeding is one thing. Improving that is another thing. A lot of times all we can do is maintain what we have because of our conservative budgets.
Right.
I do not believe, and I will not sign off on strapping the taxpayer for something that I haven't exhausted all options on. And that's how we get along and go along in our precinct budgets. I've got 1.5 million in my precinct budget. I've got overhead that comes off right across the top with employees and with benefits. At the end of the day, when all of the overhead is paid, I'm sitting on about 450 to 500,000 in construction money on 168 miles of county roads. 168 miles of roads with, let's say, $500,000. That doesn't go very far. We got to get very creative with that money. And we get creative with that money by partnering with TxDOT, using surplus materials. Okay? Instead of ordering a fresh load of limestone from a vendor, if TxDOT's got some surplus somewhere, I'm going to sniff it out. I'm going to find it. Because I can pick that surplus up either for free, hopefully, which is always the goal, or I can pick it up for pennies on the dollar. We've got surplus resources for a lot of our culverts and our drainage pipes. We'll pick up concrete culverts at a plant out of town for pennies on the dollar that don't quite make it into the private sector. So we'll pick that stuff up. So we got to get very creative with our construction needs. And through that process of getting creative, in 2017 we were able to pave 14 miles. That is unheard of for a precinct. We broke all records doing that. But we have easily, in my 7 years, doubled the amount of new roads that the precinct has seen in the prior decade. We doubled that number and have exceeded it in 2017. Getting back to the original question, what would I spend a windfall on? We would look at our thoroughfares. We would look at the roads that we have that have the most traffic counts. We have county roads in Victoria County that see over 1,000 vehicles a day. You think of an old hillbilly county road, an old back road, and you think, man, that thing sees a truck like once a week. That used to be the case. That was the case when I was a kid. I grew up and I currently still live 20 miles from town. I'm way out there. Everything has changed since I was a kid. In the 80s, those old county back roads, they did see one old dusty pickup once a week. Now we've got county roads that are seeing over 1,000 vehicles a day. Salem Road sees over 600 vehicles a day according to the 2017 traffic counts. We would focus on those thoroughfares, look at the traffic counts, we would open those roads up and we would double down, we would put that money into base material. That's one of our biggest struggles. We don't have the budgets that can build subgrades and base underneath the roads that our traffic's carrying. And so instead of a 20 to 30 year lifespan on a new road, we're seeing a 10-year lifespan on our new roads. And again, it goes back to that maintenance versus improving. It comes down to funding. It comes down to our budgets. We get creative with it. We simply do the best we can.
I gotcha. You had mentioned your position as one of the 5 elected officials who create and approve the county budget, right? If we have another hypothetical here, windfall sales tax collections in 2018, which departments should receive the greatest percentage of this windfall?
One thing we're getting away from, we're mindful of change in Victoria County. We've got a very healthy commissioner's court. You rarely see us bickering and fighting and just the drama that brews by nature within a governing body. You don't see that with us. We respect one another. We consider all options. We believe in open discussion, and that process works. There are other commissioners' courts in the state of Texas that cannot stand one another. They can't sit in the same room with one another. You'll see commissioners that vote no just because the guy he hates votes yes, and that's ineffective. It's grossly ineffective. So there are some things that we as commissioners' court are trying to change that old mindset with innovation. And one of the things we focus on is communication. Communication with your department heads, communication with your other elected officials. It is not uncommon. Victoria County, by statute, as are all counties in the state of Texas, are made up, their leadership are elected officials, okay? Not staff like you see in the city. City government and county government are night and day different. City council members are elected. but they handle the passing of administrative decisions in city council. From that point forward, everything else is handled by staff. Their police chief is staff, their fire chief is staff. They don't have that autonomy of an elected official. Victoria County and all counties in the state of Texas, the leadership is all elected. The county treasurer handles payroll. The county treasurer handles vendor payments. Those vendor payments go through the auditor's office as a filter, if you will, to make sure all the paperwork lines up and the checks and balances are in place. The auditor is appointed by the district judges. The Commissioner's Court approves those vendor payments and approves that payroll weekly. So you've got different elected offices doing different jobs within Victoria County, but they all harmonize, or they're all supposed to harmonize in order to achieve one task, and that's to serve the public's needs. Okay? Getting back to that communication, we communicate with our department heads. So whether that communication is those tough conversations with a department head like we went through in 2018, where I need you to cut $100,000 from your budget, and because we have drafted a preliminary budget, and in an effort for this thing to balance and for us to maintain the effective tax rate, I need you to cut that $100 grand. It's a tough conversation to have with a department head. The DA stepped up, volunteered a chunk of money out of his office. That was a breath of fresh air, because we avoided that. We avoided that difficult discussion. He knew we were going through tough budget times. He offered it. We cut the airport. We cut the health department. We cut every single department within the parameters of the general fund, as well as the road and bridge budgets, in order to make that budget balance for the taxpayers. We could have easily gone down the easy road and say, hey, we're $1 million short. Tell me what the tax increase would be to get $1 million in here. We just balance it according to last year. We need $1 million bucks, bump the tax rate up, keep on trucking. We're through with the budget in 2 hours. That's the easy road, but that's not the road that keeps the taxpayer in mind at all times. We're public servants. We respond to the public. Victoria County's voters have proven that they are conservative voters. We're obligated to be conservative budget officers. Now, through this hypothetical windfall that you asked about, what would I do with it? I would go back and have that conversation with our department heads in retrospect. We've had some difficult years in the past. Dale Zook has sent us a check for $1 million out of the goodness of his heart. He has donated this money to the county. Let me know what your needs are. Derek Neal, Health Department Director. Tell me what your vision is for the health department, and tell me what your needs are. Don't give me a wish list. Don't get carried away with it, but tell me how we can better serve Victoria County if we can give you a small cash injection. District Attorney, same conversation. Tell me how we can expand your services with a small cash injection. But it's a slippery slope. A small cash injection or a small windfall can be as volatile as sales tax revenue. So a lot of these improvements would have to be improvements that wouldn't cripple us down the road, three years down the road, when we may not be able to afford sustaining those improvements.
Right.
So.
All right, well, let's move down to what is the hardest part about your job, and what have you done that proves you have successfully fulfilled that function? What would be the hardest part of your job? And
There is
something
no
that
doubt.
you've done?
There is no doubt the most difficult part of my job. You learn the duties of the job as you go along, okay? You learn, if you're not familiar with it, which I was fortunate to be familiar with it before I got there, road construction is not difficult to wrap your mind around. Road construction for the public is difficult to wrap your mind around. The public is very difficult to work for. On the education side of it, educating the public on how county government works is difficult. We don't get to have these conversations with the public weekly. We have Commissioner's Court, and the critic may say, well, why don't we have this education lesson every week in court? Because that's our opportunity to handle the business for Victoria County that week, okay? We need more of this Q&A with the public. Huge misconception, we do not fear the public. Why would we fear the public? We don't hide behind closed doors hoping the public would go away. I will have this conversation with the public any day of the week. Q&A the public until the cows come home. We fear the media's filter. That is a problem. When the media filters what we're trying to communicate with the public and hinders our ability to communicate this information to them, that's a struggle for us. But figuring out how to work with the public was difficult for me early on. And it took a couple years because I've explained to you the struggles from the financial side, from the budget side. Let's average out the amount of pavement that we shoot in Precinct 4 to 10 miles a year. 10 miles a year out of 168 miles in the precinct. That's a lot of time before you see a full circle of pavement. If we started on Road 1 and ended on Road 168, that's a lot of time in between those two roads before you get to us. So you have people that call. You've got several types of people that call. You have people that call already angry because they've waited too long to call. They've hit that pothole for 6 weeks and they just assume that they're being neglected and we don't care. And a lot of times after a 10-minute conversation, I can explain to them, we're in the middle of 2 large paving projects. I know you're eat up with potholes. Give me a week. I'm going to have somebody out there, but I can't break them off right now. I know they're there. We're not neglecting you. I know they're there. And going back to that communication, being able to communicate with the public and figuring out how to communicate with the public has changed tremendously and helped me along the ways. I used to get those angry phone calls and it just kind of freeze, you know, because some of them can get pretty rough. Some of them can ruin your day if you let them. And I would immediately kind of go on the defense. I'd say, yes, ma'am, your road's bad, but man, what we're working on is a whole lot worse. Or no, ma'am, I don't have, or no, sir, I don't have the money to get there. You got, you know, maybe we'll look at the budget next year. I used to kind of get defensive and try to defend why their road is eat up. Then I changed my approach with the public. I started agreeing with them. Little Miss Jane Doe would call and say, you know, Old Highway Road is beat to pieces. And I would say, yes, ma'am, it is. Because there's no denying it, it was. and I found that humorously just takes the wind out of their sails. Because they expect me to throw some excuse at them, or they expect me to come up with some blah, 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 blah. When I would say, yes, ma'am, your road is awful. I was down it last week, and it is horrendous. And they usually kind of chuckle. And if I can get them to chuckle, then we can have this conversation right here. And they understand where we are, and they understand where our budget is. And then I can tell her, you know, we're right in the middle of Schmidt Road. I've got 7 employees on Schmidt Road for 10 hours a day. Next week, I'll be the stopping point. We'll get somebody out there to patch your holes. You cannot patch every pothole in Precinct 4 in one day. But you can bet on one thing. Somebody's going to call about a pothole in Precinct 4 every day. Because they're there. We run lean, we accomplish more, and we spend less. That's pretty much the summary of my office.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I enjoyed this.
Sir.
Thank you. Is that a wrap?